Bud has been a supporter of the Atlas Society, gosh, going back before my time, and really very, very grateful to have him as part of our community. He is also kind of an Ayn Rand character out of Atlas Shrugged and Galt's Gulch come to life. He has founded 7 companies, 3 of which have successfully IPO'd, and 3 of which have had successful exits totaling $9.3 billion. In 2017, Bud founded and serves as executive chairman of Atlas Energy Solutions, so you can see that where the influence comes. And that went public in 2023 with a market cap of $1.8 billion. He's chairman of 3 other private companies, a new Brigham Exploration, and also Brigham Royalties and Langford Energy Partners. He has, as I mentioned, worked with the Atlas Society on this project, and he's also produced several spectacular films of his own, so he was a wonderful partner for this. So, Bud, how did you get into the energy business in the first place?
Well, can everybody hear me okay? Thank you. Well, I was fortunate. I grew up in Midland, which is in West Texas, which happens to be in the middle of the largest and best oil field in the United States. So growing up there, I certainly had some role models to look up to, bit larger than life wildcatters that found big oil fields, and so that that probably helped a lot. And then I went to the University of Texas and couldn't find my way. Initially, I was in business and got bored. Ended up in geophysics, which I loved. Was drawn to physics and had an aptitude for it and seeing in 3 dimensions. And so got out and got with a seismic data processing company for less than a year. Worked there, but I knew I wanted to start a company. I knew pretty early, and got on with an E&P company. And so I got married, and my wife became she was a geologist, became an oil and gas attorney. But knowing we wanted to start a company, we didn't have much money, hardly any money. But she got a job at a law firm and could pay the bills, and we had $25,000 in savings. We started our first company. And that first well was like $18,000 out of my pocket, and it came in. And then we hit on 11 straight wells and 13 out of 14, which was really unusual at the time. It's very common now in shale, but it wasn't in exploration. And that got the feet under us, and as you said, we went public later and then founded the subsequent companies.
So some of your companies are named Atlas, others are named Anthem. Yeah. Maybe you can tell us a little bit of your Ayn Rand origin story. Yeah. How early was that?
Well, I think I was 25 or 26, and I do remember as a kid, Midland is, being in the oil field is a very entrepreneurial, self-reliant community, and I remember seeing a lot of "Who is John Galt" stickers, and I was wondering, what's that about? And my mom had read, after someone suggested Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, and she suggested I read them. And I read Fountainhead, and then I quickly read Atlas Shrugged, and then I read everything that Ayn wrote after that.
What's your favorite, and which character do you most identify with?
Well, The Fountainhead, Howard Rourke really affected me personally. I mean, as an individual that was so principled, and he put himself out there, and he was just fearless, and he didn't care what other people said or thought. And I was kind of insecure at the time. I was like, wow, that is impressive. And then Atlas Shrugged really philosophically really helped me grow philosophically. And but in terms of the characters, Hank Rearden, I'm probably a lot like Hank Rearden. In that the government and politicians and the media tend to hate the oil and gas business that have been after us, but despite that, we continue to fight to create jobs and to find oil and gas and do our business. But then maybe a little bit like isn't it amazing that Ayn in 1947 wrote about Wyatt that figured out how to get oil out of shale, and half a century later we figured out how to get oil out of shale, and that's how we really hit it big, was drilling horizontal wells and fracking in shale. So So I've got a little bit of Ellis Wyatt, maybe a little like John Galt too, because trying to encourage policy to create Galt's Gulch. So.
Well, and I think a little bit like Ayn Rand herself, because she called art the indispensable medium for the moral ideal, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But when you talk about oil and gas being under attack, and of course in Atlas Shrugged, the great people who are holding up the world on their shoulders are having the world pressed down harder and harder on them. So how do you go about making the moral case for fossil fuels at a time when you have this kind of radical environmentalism, and not just that, but the ESG and all of that we talked about earlier today?
Yeah, well, I mean, the moral case that Jay and I were talking, I mean, you want to make the moral case, just imagine living in a cave, because without fossil fuels, that's where we would be. I mean, virtually everything in this room, in your clothes, pharmaceuticals, everything is oil and gas. So I'm so proud to be in this business that we've played such a major role in human flourishing. I mean, we live like kings relative to people just a few centuries ago, and oil and gas, it's a fundamental part of that. It wouldn't be possible without oil and gas. But for more, read Alex Epstein's Moral Case for Fossil Fuel, and he's a big Ayn Rand guy, as y'all all probably know, or Fossil Future. He did a great job in his books.
Absolutely, and of course we would love to have Alex maybe speak at our next student conference, so if you can prevail upon him,
I'm happy to try to help.
We'd love to have that happen. So, Richard was talking earlier about stakeholder capitalism and how it really is kind of a form of fascism in which there's private ownership but not private total control, and how ESG has been a way in this whole stakeholder capitalism to kind of, communism and fascism with the extra steps. So perhaps you could comment on that, in terms of, have you had struggles with that, and how have you personally experienced it, and then maybe whether or not we're experiencing a moment of reprieve, or is it just going to get repackaged into something else?
Yeah, boy, have I. I think if Ayn was writing her novels now, she might, instead of directive whatever number, it might be ESG, it might be DEI, CRT. These three-letter acronyms don't come out of thin air. But they, and I'll give you an anecdote to help explain my perspective. And early on, when ESG first came out, I mean, one of the benefits of Ayn is I understood how dangerous it was. But friends of mine who share our values for the most part said, well, I don't think I like ESG, but I do kind of like that conscious capitalism. And I said, really? I said, as if, is capitalism unconscious? Like you need to modify capitalism. And so really when you look at all of these things, they are Trojan horses, and they're attacks on property rights. And I'm a big believer in the Friedman doctrine, of course, and I think we've really gotten sloppy. All our institutions and managers of companies have gotten very sloppy, because when you're managing other people's money, you have a core responsibility to create value for them, to make money. And that is your core responsibility. And then, but a lot of people like conscious capitalism, I think they turn things upside down, and some of them are well-meaning, but they get caught up in this, and they're useful idiots, really. And so, because when you look at it, and one thing that we did to try to combat it, one, we got involved in fighting, but like BlackRock and a lot of the banks, but two, one of the Atlas Energy Solutions, we decided we're going to be proactive and try to set an example for other companies. So I wrote a letter, who we are, and it spelled out, we believe in the Friedman doctrine, we believe in private property rights, it's fundamental to American exceptionalism. We do not blow with these winds of these political and cultural movements. We hire based on merit. We don't hire based on race, et cetera, et cetera. So we just explicit with a lot of things you wouldn't think you would have to say. But we said that in our letter. And then that kind of put up a wall around us. And I think it has affected many other people, and other corporate leaders are starting to follow. Let me say one more thing. The other thing we did communicate, and the reason I think they turned it upside down, and Milton Friedman, in my view, didn't go far enough in this, and partly maybe because he didn't manage a company. But when you manage a company, you know to create value over the longer term, you have to, one, take good care of your employees, because they're what's going to deliver your success. Hiring great people that share your values. Two, be good stewards of the communities and the environments you operate in. That if you don't do those things, you're not going to generate profits over the longer haul. But it's all built around private property rights and your fiduciary obligation to make money for your shareholders, and it's sustainable. Unlike these movements that are parasitical, that are out to destroy their attacks on property rights. The Friedman Doctrine and your responsibility to property and other people's property is virtuous and is sustainable.
Yes, and I think that's part of the reason why it's so important to go further than merely making the consequentialist argument in favor of capitalism, the sort of utilitarian argument that it's the greatest good for the greatest number, and really to make the moral argument, because we must get off the back foot, we must seize the moral high ground, which is justly ours. And we talk about how politics is downstream from culture, but culture is downstream from philosophy. So really reclaiming these values, fundamental values, like the justice involved in people that are investing in companies and have a expectation for a fair trade, and also like the pride in achievement, and to stop kind of, poor-mouthing ourselves, I'm just here to give back, when in fact you should be rightly proud of how much you have achieved and how much value that you have created. Yeah,
we need more business leaders to stand up for property rights and economic liberty.
So I think we've managed to pretty successfully, aside from some humor, stay away from politics for this conference, but there has been a big change, and I was wondering in terms of the kind of regulatory climate that you faced over the past 4 years, and are you feeling like that this has been a fundamental change, and how is the environment that you find yourself operating in going forward?
Well, I mean, clearly the current administration is the opposite. They're not hostile to us. They're supportive, and they recognize how important energy liberty is for the world. And so they've reduced the regulatory burdens, which are substantial, particularly EPA, et cetera, with the carbon stuff, and the climate catastrophism was just doing everything they could to shut us down, and then opening up access to more lands, and so they've been great in that regard. So what happens when you have less regulation and you have more supply? You have lower prices, and that's great for the average American, and it's great for the world. So it's been very beneficial.
Now, we didn't put this in the questions, but when we were having a private conversation earlier, you shared some exciting news that you're not just settling for what's happening here in the United States, but you're looking at some other projects overseas.
Yeah, we are, and I don't want to talk too much about it. But no, I mean, a couple things, and this gets back to your question about who do we model after, and John Galt. You look at what's happened, you know, one of the things, and this I'm digressing a little bit, one of the things that's great about our country, and thank goodness for the founding fathers, is their wisdom is federalism, and we have these states that adopt different policies, and one thing that we see that happens is that individuals and capital flow to regions and areas where they can be free to operate and to create value. And that's what we see Californians, Illinois, New York migrating to Florida and Texas, but also internationally. I mean, it's refreshing to see some of these countries that are adopting more economic liberty. And I think there's tremendous opportunity associated with that.
So, as an oilman, thoughts on nuclear?
Nuclear is a wonderful source of energy, and it's for baseload energy. It's the safest energy out there. It's very reliable. It's not intermittent. It's terrific for the environment. It's a no-brainer. But this is where, you know, objectivism is beneficial, is being objective and not believing everything you hear, checking the premises and critical analysis, and setting aside emotion. You know, they scared a lot of people back in the day with these movies and stuff about nuclear, but when you look at the facts, you look at the data, it's a wonderful energy source. So they need to decriminalize nuclear. We're going to need it, particularly with AI and automation.
So what aspects of objectivism most resonate with you, and how has it helped you either in personal challenges or professional ones?
Yeah, I think for me, objectivism, one, how to think and having a coherent philosophy of life. And I remember one of Ayn, she talked about, you know, too many people, their philosophy on life is like a junk heap of conflicting ideas and contradictions. And I think that's true. I know so many people I know are like that. So it's such an advantage, and it's like a building. If a building is not structurally sound, or an airplane even worse, if it's not sound, I wouldn't want to fly on that plane, and you wouldn't want to operate. So it's a real advantage competing in business, and to have a coherent framework to be able to think properly and to critically analyze and question premises, et cetera. The other is to be really objective and to set aside emotion, because you know, you see that in business, particularly the oil business. It's so up and down, and there were times. There was one time in particular we almost lost our company, and the emotion can overwhelm you. And to be able to step back and to be objective and to set aside the emotion, and though something may be difficult to do objectively, I have to do this. That's a huge advantage as well.
Well, as Ayn Rand said, you can evade reality, but you can't evade
Exactly.
the consequences
Yes.
of evading reality. So sometimes confronting unpleasant tasks is, you know, the better alternative than
That's one of
letting
my
them.
favorite quotes, because we're living that today with all the misinformation out there about energy systems and climate catastrophism. And Europe adopted a lot of really bad policies. They ignored reality, but now they're living with the consequences of ignoring reality. California is as well, and unfortunately Texas is as well. So,
Is Europe gone too far?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
they won't
sad.
be able to get back from this, you
It's
think?
tragic. I mean, well, they're still full throttle on the climate catastrophism and the carbon being a huge problem, so it's corrupting all that they're doing there, and it's sad for their citizens there, because their grid is not reliable. They're vulnerable to more blackouts like we are in some of our states, including Texas, unfortunately, and their energy costs are up and to the right. So it's tragic for the people. Well,
you know, as we've seen in Argentina, how quickly something can really change, especially if there is,
it's amazing.
You know, a grassroots movement and education, that when you have a leader with the right ideas and the ability to communicate effectively, even a country which, you know, many of us would have said was too far gone to possibly be redeemed, you see how it can change. And that's why I think part of the reason I feel that our experience here at Atlas Society and at Gulch, and particularly the work that we're now doing at Atlas Society International and our John Galt schools and our new intellectual conference is so important, because who knows, maybe one of you out there in the audience are going to be the next Malay, and making sure that we are seeding the cause of liberty with philosophy. So, film business. Okay, talk a little bit about that. I've been very excited to watch some of your films, including 12 Mighty Orphans and
well, I don't know how I got involved with the two Atlas Shrugged movies, but I don't know if John reached out to me or Aguilaro, or if I reached out to him, but I was passive, but glad to support Atlas Shrugged 2 and 3. So I'm, and then we did make a movie, My All-American, a true story about a heroic young man who had incredible courage through extreme challenges. And then we also invested in Reagan, who was, in my view, the best president in my lifetime. So I'm definitely not in movies to make money, because I lose money in movies. But I only do it to project positive values, so anyway, I don't know if we'll get involved. I can't take any credit for, the only one that I was actively involved in was My All-American, but I was glad to be.
And what kind of projects, what kind of stories appeal to you?
Stories that project positive values. Unfortunately, Hollywood produces a lot of crap, that's a lot of very destructive value, particularly if you're raising a family. So that's why, we were so actively involved in My All-American, a young man who had so much courage and through adversity. And so we just want to project positive values.
Since you are on the board of the project that Jay was speaking of earlier, in terms of trying to find common cause between secularists and people of faith, why do you think that this is an important project for advancing shared values?
Well, we have become so divided, and everybody is focused on the differences, and there are a lot of movements, a lot of people out there that want us focused on the differences, and because there a lot of figures over the years recognized that's the best way to disrupt civilization is to divide them. I think Saul Alinsky and others like that, and we've had political leaders that are pushing that. Credit to Jay and David and everybody that's leading the charge on that. I was happy to get involved. Jay and I had some conversations about it. Is that we all believe in liberty, and a friend who's teaches Objectivism said, he talked about the founding fathers. They all came from different worlds and different perspectives. Some were secular, and they came together and they created magic. And we've just forgotten, what a wonderful experiment they created, and that Ayn recognized and came over here. And so I just think it's a wonderful effort, and I want to do everything I can do to help Jay and everybody to help reinvigorate the appreciation for our founding principles.
So we've got a lot of young people here today, and they're busy asking questions of our panels, and they're asking questions of each other. And I was really pleased to hear from some who've been to a lot of different student conferences and even other objectivist conferences, to say that they found that this was a very warm and welcoming and very engaged environment. But as I said, when I was welcoming people, that the people in the audience were also at the stage of life where they may be mulling over a few big questions of their own, in terms of choosing their values, choosing their careers, choosing their partners. So what advice do you wish that somebody had given you when you were the age of some of the young people that are with us today?
Well, one, do what you're already doing, study philosophy, and I think if you study philosophy, then you'll probably come to the conclusion that Ayn is the greatest contemporary philosopher, but you form your own views on that. And if you do that, then you can develop a framework for living and for achieving your dreams and your goals. And then I would say, you know, be a crusader for your values. You know, put yourself out there like Howard Rourke did, like Hank Rearden, keep fighting, like John Galt, and for your values. And don't be afraid of a fight. Because you don't want to be at the end of your days and looking back and saying, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd stepped out there and put myself out there. I wish I'd challenged that idea. Mm-hmm. And so we need more people to stand up for individual liberty and the principles that Ayn illuminated so very well for us all. So I'm very optimistic, and that's why I support the Atlas Society. I think, you know, it's not just for me. I like to build and create value, and I love the oil and gas business because it's tangible value, and I can see the impact it has on people's lives. But there's also intellectual value, and that's what Jennifer and David and Jay, you know, propagate, you know, beneficial intellectual value. And so that's why I support the Atlas Society.
Well, we're very grateful. Gratitude is a virtue that Jay talks about a lot, and that we have done some, you know, theoretical and philosophic work at the Atlas Society to look at gratitude not just as some kind of hallmark slogan, but as a way of thinking more objectively about one's circumstances, understanding that we are not only physically wired to over-prioritize and over-perceive threats and problems, but that we are also in a market that recognizes that and finds ways to want to scare us, and then taking a moment to dwell on gratitude in an objective way is a way for us to kind of gain ballast and, you know, I think gain strength and self-esteem by leveraging into what our strengths are and how we're going to overcome them. So,
yes.
Just wanted to see if you had any final thoughts before we close up, or anything that you wanted to talk about?
No, thank you for inviting me.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give this video a like and hit that subscribe button below.